Right now, feminism is the criminalization of men. I would argue that Spain is right now the most feminist country in the world.
Hello, everybody. This is a male space, and today we have another episode of the Mansplainers. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Stephen Baskerville, and Diagosta from Spain. Diagosta is an independent investigator in law and also a man who is concerned with men's issues and family. Thank you for being with us today, Diagosta.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's a great name for the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm especially, if I may say so, to start out, I'm especially glad to have Dagosta here with us today because I think that I'd like to talk about Spain and about European issues,
Mhm.
especially, which I don't think get enough attention. We seem to let the Anglophone countries kind of get the highest profile on some of these issues. But what's happening in Europe is also very troubling. So I'm very glad to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I was really looking forward for this to this because I saw a few publications from you. How should I call you, Doctor Baskerville or Stephen?
Oh, as you like. Yeah,
Yeah,
Stephen is fine.
yeah, Stephen. Yeah, Stephen. Perfect. So I saw a couple of tweets from you, and I was really surprised. Like you were promoting and talking about recovering some logics from patriarchy, and I thought, okay, this guy, this is this is something new. There is not many people trying to fight that fight. You know. I was
Yeah.
really surprised.
Well, a few years ago, I would have covered up my convictions about patriarchy, and I would have hedged it and said it in kind of indirect ways. But I don't anymore. This is one encouraging sign: is that people do talk about patriarchy quite openly and advocating it and being in favor of it. So, and so I'm not as diffident about that. I'm not as sheepish as I
Yeah.
used to be about some of the, taking a forthright stand on those issues. So. I'd like
So,
to talk a little about, well, I don't know a huge amount about Spain. We think of Spain
mhm.
traditionally as a Catholic country, a traditional country in some ways. So we think of Southern Europe as, until recent decades, Southern Europe was generally in some ways more conservative, at least in social issues and family issues, than Northern Europe. But Spain, of course, in the recent years has not necessarily fulfilled that, has not necessarily been with that stereotype. It's had a
No.
succession of socialist governments.
Yeah.
It's enacted a number of quite radical policies on the welfare state, on sexuality and the family. But it's also, I think, there is underlying all of that. There is still maybe a core, a foundation of traditional conservatism, or at least again on social issues in Spain, that with which one could build. But this is also true of other countries as well in Europe, and especially, I suppose, Southern Europe. They're not as traditional or conservative or as Catholic as they used to be.
Yeah, but I kind of agree because where there was a fire, there are still some ashes left, right? So we can use those ashes to rekindle that fire. But I wish Spain was a country with such traditional values because the state and liberalism and all these things, it has completely demolished us as a society. And as you can probably tell better than me, most countries are starting to be similarly culturally similar. Like it's like culture is getting globalized, and we are more similar to other countries than what we ever were. So so yeah, mm, too much socialism and too much welfare state and feminist welfare state as you were talking about, and sexual politics. That
Wow.
is. And I would argue that because of feminist legislation that is so deep in the country that is right now in the constitutional text. They changed the constitutional text in February 2024 to add positive discrimination towards women, and they have been doing that since 2004 with different laws, but it's increasing and increasing, and it's not stopping at all. But I'm open. I'm open to find out that other countries are worse than Spain. I gladly would give out
Well,
the
that's
title.
interesting. Can you tell us in some of the other particulars, some specifics about how Spain has become
Yes.
such a feminist it's not a republic, it's a monarchy, of course. How
Yeah.
Spain, even more so, you expect a monarchy to be more traditional perhaps than a republic,
Yeah.
perhaps, possibly, but this is no longer the case necessarily. So yeah, if you could tell us a little more for those of us
Yeah. Of
outside
course.
Spain.
Of course. So the headline is that right now feminism is the criminalization of men to get power for women, basically. Maybe we can agree on that or maybe not, but
Yeah.
we have a feminist law that it was put in place in 2004, and this was coming from the UN 1995 fourth global meeting of women from the UN, the meeting in Beijing, right? And because of that meeting, they decided there was an agenda to end violence against women, and there has been legislation all over the world, in many countries, in the US, in Filipinas, in Spain. Many laws are stemming from that agenda, from that aim of ending violence against women. But this ending violence against women from a feminist perspective. And in Spain, this has taken hold in a way that all crimes, for example, all crimes committed by men against wives or girlfriends, are now more severe because of patriarchy. Meaning, if your wife hits you and you hit her back, for example, and both of you do the same amount of damage, which is, let's say, no damage at all, your crimes will be punished more harshly, more severely, just because of patriarchy. That's the justification in the law. So, and the worst part of this is that this is without proof, without evidence. The law decided that patriarchy makes your conducts, your behavior worse, and is worse for society and for women, and that's why you get, for example, the double amount of sentence.
Oh.
And yeah, so basically, men don't have equality before the law, and they don't have presumption of innocence in Spain.
Now that's interesting that you focus on that because and you mentioned the word criminalization of men. That's what feminism is. And I've said something similar myself many times that feminism has become, it's not just about abortion, it's not just about entering the workplace, equal pay and all these media slogans. It's really a method of putting men behind bars. It's a method of putting men in jail. And this has almost become the top priority. I'd say it has become the top priority of feminism is to criminalize men and put them in incarcerate them, put them in usually without any due process of law.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to do? They believe that men have been oppressing women unfairly and with the objective of creating a tyranny over women. They believe that is the situation for men and women of of all human history. So now, because they believe that was a fact and that has effects on today's situation, they are trying to revert that. It's impossible for them not to criminalize men because men have been criminals for them. So, so of course they are thinking that way.
No. And of course, men do commit the preponderance of violent crime, street crime and so forth. Whereas women have other ways of creating crime by, for example, by
Mm.
bearing by bearing children out of wedlock, which is a certain way to breed crime. So it's but yeah, superficially it is plausible that men, and of course men's physical strength. But this is a very strange. Is there any one of the striking things about this elsewhere, of course, is the lack of pushback, the lack of challenge to this, the lack of opposition. Now, Spain, again, we think of as a strongly, at one time, a strongly Catholic country with the conservative Catholic, especially conservative Catholic Church. I mean, the birthplace of Opus Dei, for example. Is there any pushback on this from the Catholic Church or the conservative elements of Catholicism or in
Mhm.
Spain?
I wish there was. I wish there was because, well, for example, this meeting I referenced from the UN in 1995. The Pope congratulated the conference and said it was a great conference and it was really necessary. And this was a feminist. I don't know how to call it.
Yeah.
It was like a witch meeting of feminists. It was 30,000 of them, and that was the Pope, right, in Italy. So if that was what the Pope thought about that feminist reunion that has been affecting us, imagine what the lower parts of the church think about it. So so yeah, there is some pushback. There is some pushback. They are not ready to give up, but unfortunately, I think that the church it's been heavily infiltrated by these narratives and these ideas, and and they do need some help to to push back. I mean, I think there are many people that want to, but at this point, we are so confused with these narratives that I don't know. For example, I see. I was considering about writing a letter to a Catholic priest in Spain because he was advocating for men to be chivalrous with women in a simping way, maybe. So he was advocating for men to throw themselves at the feet of women, and I was like, you're a you're a Catholic priest. Come on, you shouldn't want for men to be helping women to become narcissistic and to be ungrateful and to do these kinds of things, you know. So yeah, there is some pushback, but I think it's limited by the deep penetration of these narratives.
Yeah, what strikes me, if I could just ask about the Spanish political culture, especially the culture on the right and its weakness. Um, of course, I get the impression that the Spanish right, the Catholic Church, Opus Dei, it's been always been well. I can tell you, people my age, I'm older than both of you, and growing up in the 70s, 60s, and 70s and 80s, of course, we always got a continuous narrative from Spain that a legacy of the Spanish Civil War, that the Franco and the fascists were bad and evil, and
Of course.
quasi Nazis, and the Republicans were good, and
Oh yes.
Hemingway and the Abraham Lincoln brigades and George Orwell and all these these leftists fought for Spain. The good guys were the Republicans, and the bad guys was the fascists. And I know that the left has used this against the right as leverage, much the way they use fascism in Italy or in Nazism in Germany. That if you say anything about, if you object to this in any way, you're far right, you're quasi fascist, phalangist or whatever. Um, does this still
Oh
cowl
yes.
the
Yes,
Spanish conservatives?
yeah, that is completely accurate. Whenever you are trying to make a point or to make something good, they will invoke Franco, and they will say, "Oh, this is you're like Franco, and and you want, and we are." Uh, it's like they are constantly bringing back their own version of what happened in the past to
Mm.
try to have some moral grounds on the present. And this is the reason why Spain is so politically left right now, because there has been some pushback against, because we had a really strong Catholic and traditional background. There has been a lot of work to revert that. So it's like a pendulum swing, right? Because the pendulum was in a Catholic culture, right now is going to the opposite direction. It's completely going to the opposite direction, and yeah, it's what you just described is happening in Spain today. For example, they are still trying to win the civil war. They are trying to demolish the El Valle de los Caídos. It was the monument that Franco built for the fallen, right? So they removed Franco's body from a few years ago from the place, and now they're trying to demolish the biggest cross in the world that is there. It's a huge stone cross that governs the valley, and they're still trying to fight that because they are still working on making Spain more liberal, more. And one thing I would like to say, our political right-wing main politicians, both parties, they are not right wingers. They are liberals. They believe in liberalism. They don't want traditional values. They are not fighting for Catholic values. They are liberals. They just care about the market and the free market, and that's their more conservative position. They really don't value family that much, for example.
Well, this has been a problem throughout. Maybe if we could branch out a little from Spain to the rest of Europe. I mean, this has been going on throughout Europe, hasn't it, for the last few decades? Is the the traditional right associated with Catholicism, with monarchism, and this is kind of I suppose in Southern Europe, this was we think of this as maybe lingering a little bit longer, but increasingly the right, the conservatives aren't standing up for Catholicism or the family um, or monarchy, certainly not, or aristocracy. They're standing up for free markets. They're really liberals. They're, as you say, they're classical liberals. They're libertarians, and the libertarian agenda has displaced the traditional the traditional conservative agenda on the right. And so there's really no one upholding traditional values anymore in Europe as such. There's just, some people blame Margaret Thatcher for this, for transforming the conservatives in Britain into basically, in many ways, a libertarian party. Um, and you can see this elsewhere. So basically, it's a battle. European politics is becoming a battle between the liberals and the left, not between liberals
The,
and conservatives, not between the right and the left, but between liberals and leftists, liberals and socialists, or nowadays liberals and feminists.
I mean, I don't know how do Bradley or Brad, or how do
Bradley,
I
yes.
call you?
Bradley.
Bradley. Yeah. I don't know how you see it, but it's to me, it's a fight between the left and the left, because it's the classical left, which is the liberal left, because they were the left in
Yes.
when this all came up, and now the current left, the current left is absolutely crazy, which because they want to demolish family and everything. But the former left, they did demolish the previous system and the traditional system, and I don't know, they completely took the power from the church and from family, and that's why the state has grown so much, because those were the two competing powers with the state: family or clans, family clans and family, and the church. And now we don't have anything to fight to calm the state, and the state with the market are completely allied. I really don't know many about these topics, but that's how I see it, at least.
Well, yes, that the family unit is weakened in America as well, and the strength of the state is enormous. So basically, the state has replaced fathers in many cases, and that's been going on some time. which is evidenced by Stephen's work. So I have a question also. How does this, what you've been talking about, what are some of the effects on men's lives, even in their day to day life, in their employment, in their prospects for marriage, finding mates? How is this panning out for just everyday life for men?
Well, keep in mind that the welfare feminist state is about criminalizing men, right? So, in order to give you this welfare, this how do you call them? This help. This is all predicated on the feminist agenda, right? And it's predicated on criminalizing men. So when you are a child and you start going to school, you are going to be criminalized. You won't be allowed to play football in the recess in many places because that's patriarchal. So kids are losing now playing football in Spain. They are trying to get kids not to play football in Spain, which is
Boys,
absolutely
yeah.
crazy. Yeah, it's the worst place to do this. And and for example, there are many schools where they don't celebrate Father's Day. So that's another place where it will help. And 98% of your kindergarten teachers will be women, and 86% of elementary school teachers will be women, and it will be 60 something in high school. So it's going to affect you, this feminization and this feminist agenda is going to affect you uh, when you are growing up, and when you go to get the bus, you're going to see um, you're going to see these I don't know how to call it, these announcements that they put on the bus stops, these these commercials that they print in the bus stop, and you will be able to read some things like, I don't want to be like my dad when I grow up, because that was a campaign done in a few cities in Spain. I don't want to grow up to be like my father, because fathers are horrible, because fathers are the worst. So when you go to work, you might have training for feminist propaganda, or you might have to put the temperature of the air conditioning. You will have to put it higher, because if you put it lower, this is discrimination against women, because they are colder, and this is sexist and patriarchal to have a cold environment. So it's everywhere. It's going to be everywhere in your life. It's going to affect you for pretty much everything, with taxes, with, I don't know, you ask me for something and I will try to see if it affects you in your daily life and in your career, or your education.
I see. Well, yeah, well, you gave several examples that I could not even dream of. That those are extreme examples that are not here in the United States. I mean, we have a strong feminist movement here, but not as extreme as what you've explained here. What I meant was, well, what you told me, you did say everyday life is being affected by this. Even young schoolboys are being affected by this. Does it also affect the interaction of the sexes as well? For example, well, we'll use the term dating, even though I'm not fond of the term dating at this point. How does it affect that also? Even, finding a prospective wife or mate, or family formation. Is that being severely affected by this?
Like I told you, we have more globalized culture now, and this is happening everywhere, and it's happening in Spain for sure. In Spain, could be a bit stronger in some places, because false allegations are encouraged by the state, to the point that they don't prosecute. They give royal pardons to women who have falsely accused or abused their husbands or taken the kids. So you know that men have been losing. I've seen you talk about this. Have been losing standards to date, right? And now they are dating pretty much. every woman that approaches them or that accepts them. Well, that is not the case anymore. Now men are thinking twice, are because they are certainly scared. There are many scared men, and young kids not so much. But for example, I know a lawyer that his kid with 23, 22 years old, he and his friends decided to get a vasectomy because they didn't want to get tied up to a woman in case the other contraception failed. So they decided to, he and a couple of friends of him decided to freeze sperm and to get a vasectomy and to take that measure to protect themselves against litigation from women. So that is a really extreme example, okay? That is not the case for everyone. But yeah, men are thinking twice about dating and about forming families. It's certainly having that effect.
Yes, well, that could have a severe effect on a society as well, which we've discussed several times in our program here.
Can I ask you, sorry, I cut out there, my microphone stopped working, but I heard what you were saying. You mentioned the welfare state. And you mentioned that it's a matriarchy and that it aims to criminalize men. How attached are the Spanish people to the welfare state? We often hear this about Europeans that this is the last thing they could ever be persuaded to give up is the welfare. Europeans are just hopelessly attached to welfare. They want these cushy lives. They don't want, they want to spend all their resources on welfare and have comfy lives. And is this true? How true is it?
Yeah.
I'd be curious as to whether it's true of men or have these abuses disillusioned men at all with the welfare state?
Well, depending, because the welfare state includes protection from the police, and men are finding out that to policemen they are worse, they are less than women. So in that regard, but yeah, the easiest way to see how this is true for the Spanish society is that both main left and right political parties, they fight to see who is the best provider of health services, of pretty much welfare, and they are fighting to say we are the ones making it better and the others are destroying the welfare system, and both parties are fighting for that, to claim that, to be the ones that are improving this welfare system. So that tells you that most voters want this welfare state, and we are always it's even a between European countries. I don't know if you have noticed this, but there is a sense of pride from your healthcare system. For example, we try to compete saying that Spain has the best healthcare system in the world. And the Danish, I was living in Denmark for a few years, and they were thinking the same. They thought they were the only ones having a decent and great healthcare system. And I was like, how brainwashed we are. How brainwashed are we? This is insane. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that the center right as well as the center left parties. What about, I meant to ask you this a few minutes ago. What about the Vox or the
Yeah.
so-called far right parties
Oh
in
yeah.
Spain? Are they any different? Do they dissent from any of this?
They
Uh,
are a bit better. They are a bit better, yeah. But calling far right to a liberal party is absolutely insane. I mean, if you ask me, calling a liberal party far right, it's part of the propaganda of the extreme left, right? To call everyone far right, but when they are actually they agree with you in many things, but you still call them far right. So yeah, they are a bit better. For example, they they did start defending men, saying that all victims of domestic violence deserved help. But as time passes, because they came about in 2014-13. As time passes, they have been moderating their discourse and their policies, And for example, right now they were in the past elections they were advocating to protect women, especially women, and not protecting men so much. And in general, I personally like them better than all the other options, for sure. But I don't think there is any hope within the political system in Spain. I think it's, right now we don't have any traditional option that is actually right winger and that is actually advocating for family. They are
And this,
certainly better, uh, and
right.
this
And
is my
this,
personal opinion. Okay, so
well, I mean, what you're saying is true throughout Europe, isn't it? I mean, none of the so-called far right dissident parties, the AfD in Germany or Reform in Britain, or the Le Pen's what is it? It's still called the Rassemblement. Well, no, it's got a new name now. Rassemblement National. Uh, I mean, none of them really have very strong positions on the family, even the family by itself, let alone men. I mean, they pay lip service to the family, and some of them are somewhat anti-abortion, but that's about as far as it goes. The family, when they talk about the family, they mean abortion. They're
yeah,
anti-abortion, if that.
if
But
that,
they,
if that.
yeah, yeah.
I
But
I would like to clarify, if you don't mind, because
please,
I think I should be fair with Vox and to say that this party has had actually more in the past some people working for traditional and Catholic values. For example, she was recently expelled from from the party, Carla Toscano. She was advocating for the Aquinas values for truth, beauty, and
goodness, usually.
and goodness, and yeah, and goodness. I didn't know in English. Verdad, bien y belleza in Spanish. So she was advocating for that. She was really advocating for Catholic values. She was expelled from the country, from the party, and and many people have been expelled because they had an actual right wing and traditional intention within the party. But for example, Vox had a strong position on on abortion and on gay marriage and gay adoption, and they have been losing that over time. They have been losing that. And the worst thing to me, and this is something that could be interesting for people listening to this, is that they promised that they would completely destroy the law I was talking about, the 2004 gender-based violence, right? Gender-based violence law. So they promised they would completely destroy that law if they got power. But in their stated mission, in the I don't know the this document that politicians write about what they're going to do, the actual measures, they are saying that if they have the majority to overturn the law, they won't do it. They will make a referendum for all the country to vote if we really want to destroy that law, to overturn that law. So even if they had the majority in the Congress to do it, they wouldn't do it, which
Right.
is so disappointing. I mean, why did we elect you to do this? You have this in your program. Why are you not doing it? And it's because it's weakness. Is
Yeah.
trying not to offend women, trying not to offend. I've had politicians from Vox telling me that they are a bit concerned about offending women because they know that the moment they offend women, they will lose the election. So
I'm sure that's true. Yeah. Of course, referendums are always a way of parties evading taking a stand. They're always a way of the party, you know, letting the people decide, which means they don't
yeah,
want to take any leadership or any strong stand or commit themselves. So they want it both ways. They want to appeal to the people who would like to repeal the law, but they also don't want to offend the people who don't want to repeal the law. So that's clearly what they're doing. Well, a lot of these far right parties, so-called far right parties like Vox, Many of them are, of course, uh, one of their main issues, of course, is things like immigration, but also they tend to be somewhat Eurosceptic. They tend to push back against the European
Mhm.
Union, the power. Um, could you talk about that a little bit, the power of the European Union on these issues in Spain?
Oh, yes.
The European Union seems to be becoming increasingly a matriarchy in itself. I mean, all the top offices of the EU now are pretty much held by women or feminized men. Um,
Mhm.
and, of course, the politicians, including the male politicians of national countries, defer increasingly to women and to the European Union. So, is there any? What is the impact of the European Union in Spain on these
Yes,
issues?
and I need to remember to ask you a question about this whole topic. But Europe has the moral high ground. Is the moral justification for everything. Like in Spain, we are horrible people, and we are corrupt, and we do everything wrong. But Europe is the greatest place, and everything that comes from European orders, it's sacred because Europe is telling us we need to do this. And because Europe is telling us we need to do this, we have to do it and we cannot question it. So politicians from the right or the left or whichever politicians, when they have to do something that people don't want them to do, they blame it on Europe. They say, no, this is coming from Europe. These are European orders, and we have to do it. And there is no questioning it. Because if we leave, we couldn't leave Europe. Europe is the best. They are giving us money, and they are giving us this
That's
and
it.
that, uh, and they are giving us money for what? For welfare. So it's pretty much. Um, it's the moral high ground. I don't know how to express that in English, but it's like yeah, like they are giving us money. They are and they have some moral authority over us. Yeah, that is the
Right.
feeling.
Well, of course, this is the leverage, of course, that the EU has in so many countries in Europe, is the money that they supply. Of course, that provides leverage, especially to the countries that are net beneficiaries of European Union money. I don't know if Spain is a net beneficiary or a net payer of money to the EU, but
Well,
what? Yeah,
it is I think it's if I remember correctly, it's a beneficiary, but you are giving up everything. I mean, you are letting them control your whole economy. You are stopping your industry to have industry built on Germany. I mean, um, you're
right,
getting money, but what are you giving up? You're giving up everything. Everything. You don't have any control over. For example, right now Vox is working with a lot of farmers because the European Union is completely messing up with our farmers. They are importing goods from Morocco or from competing countries or outside, and they are accepting um, yeah, they're accepting vegetables that are grown with pesticides that they don't allow our farmers to use, and they're pretty much destroying all of our industry. And well, they did destroy our industry as a requirement to get into the European Union, you know. But right now they are destroying what little productive industries we have or extractive companies. Another
most
example, quick example would be we cannot extract oil in Spain, and I mean petrol. We have petrol in Spain. We have places where we could do it, but we cannot use it. We cannot use our own resources because the European Union won't let us, and that's absolutely insane. Because why are we not using our natural resources? The question I wanted to ask you is if you don't mind, is who is we these welfare states and these feminist welfare states? Why are they in place? Who is benefiting from this? And what's really the point? Why do we have these systems?
Right. Well, that's a very good question. Where did the welfare state come from? Well, I mean, the simple answer is, I mean, if you look at welfare states throughout the Western world, they are very much matriarchies. They are almost all run by women, um, and they long have been, and they've become more so over the decades. When did they start? They started in the early 20th century, really the late 19th century. They were rationalized by what? They were rationalized by industrialization, and that industrialization was creating hardship for people on lower incomes. And the Americans took this to extremes, making their welfare state a so-called safety net for the poor. The Europeans, on the other hand, they took the welfare state, they made it more of a kind of social insurance scheme. And they made it kind of broad-based social insurance for the middle class. Everybody in Europe, everybody perceives welfare is not a benefit, a handout for the poor in Europe. It's a social insurance scheme that everybody pays into and supposedly and everyone benefits from, supposedly. So this is why, as you say earlier, the middle class all have this perception that they're benefiting from the welfare state, that they have a stake in it, that they mustn't do anything that would weaken it or dismantle it, or it's something that benefits everyone. And it does make everyone's life, I think, maybe a little too easy. But there are certain costs to the welfare state, it seems to me. So if you spend these huge amounts of money on welfare services, there's certain things you cannot spend money on. You don't have the money. And one of the examples that I've written about myself is the military. Europe, no country in Europe, including traditional powers, great powers like France and Britain, none of them anymore have adequate militaries to defend themselves. They can't defend themselves. They all depend upon the United States. And if you don't have an adequate military, if you don't have an adequate army, navy, air force, then you don't have a foreign policy. You can't have your own foreign policy. So many countries in Europe, they complain that the European Union is eating away at their sovereignty, through immigration but there's also the eating away of their sovereignty through NATO, as well as through the EU. And this is why the United States controls the foreign policies of Europe. And the United States complains about it. Donald Trump says, oh, Europe are a bunch of freeloaders. They won't pay for their own defense. We have to pay for it, blah, blah, blah. But for many decades, the Americans have quite happily paid for European defense because it gives them control. It gives them control over the European foreign policies, and it ensures that the foreign policies of Europe will conform to what the United States wants them to conform to. And you can see this in the Ukraine war. I mean, it was the Americans who led the involvement of the West in Ukraine. Some people argue it was the United States that started the Ukraine war by pressuring Russia, and the Europeans followed because the Europeans didn't have the leverage, didn't have the autonomy to conduct their own independent foreign policies because they didn't have independent armies. So, is that now there's talk about Europeans. Trump wants to pull out of Europe, force the Europeans to conduct their own foreign policy, their own defense, make their own defense. And what I'm wondering is, whether an unintended consequence of this might be good. It might be that Europe, if European countries create their own defenses, their own armies, they might start having their own independent foreign policies. They might be able to act independently of the United States and independent, perhaps, of the European Union. This is why the European Union, of course, wants to have their army. They want the European army to be a European Union army, which, of course, would further prevent European countries from having independent foreign policies. But some people in Europe think that each country should have its own independent army, like the French say this, in order to prevent the European Union from taking control, or NATO, from taking control of their foreign policy. I don't know. What do you see this dynamic as? I'm just
Yeah,
curious whether you.
I completely agree. I was thinking about the Niet means Niet cable in 2008, where the the American embassy in Russia had for sure that that it was a red line for Russia to get Ukraine in NATO, and they still did it, and they still got them into NATO, and that could cause the war with Russia, right? So
Yeah.
so I completely agree with this explanation. I also see, so if we started creating our own military, our own armies, it could also take away from the welfare state because there is no money for everything, and it could be a way of weakening this idea of welfare state is everything. No, we need to have our own foreign policy because we are being dragged to these problems, and we shouldn't be dragged to these problems. So I think it's and it could be also there are other opportunities here because military conscription, forced military conscription of men, could wake them up to the fact that they're being required to have extra duties, and that maybe they should claim extra rights and responsibilities, and they should actually take control of extra control as men of families and countries. And also, for example, immigration, as you mentioned, immigration is having an interesting effect because immigrants are, I don't know, where you are in Europe, in Poland. Uh, well, you don't have many immigration there, right? You're not suffering from that.
Right.
But in Spain, we are we are pretty much right over Africa, and they are not only getting into Spain to stay, but to go to other countries, right? And the thing that causes most alarm is killings and rapes. And immigrants are attacking and hurting and killing mostly men. But this is not what the political parties are promoting. No, 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 no. They are concerned about raping women. So they're trying to get some actors in Spanish society. They are trying, or in Europe in general, are trying to get men to fight back to protect women, not to protect their countries, not to protect their families, not to protect other men. They want to protect women. And I think there is a good chance that we can shift those men from wanting to defend women to actually think, hey, maybe I should defend myself. Maybe I should defend my family. Maybe women are just part of society and they should be protected as part of society. And if I have to defend women, maybe I need extra rights or extra. I mean, with a leading position comes with
Yeah.
a responsibility. You get extra powers, like the imperators in Rome. They got extra powers because they had extra responsibilities, right?
That's an excellent point. I think you're right about that. I think there could be unintended consequences of that. Because there's an old idea in political thought, as you say, going back to the Italian Renaissance and from going back beyond that to Greece and Rome, that the citizen, the true citizen, is the citizen in arms. That to be a true citizen, to have the full rights and responsibilities of citizenship, you have to bear arms in defense of your homeland. And this is something the feminists have fought against, this idea. They've done everything they can to obscure it. But I think you're right. I mean, what you're describing there is just astounding. This feminization of the right. That the only thing we have to care about by immigration is crimes being committed against women, not crimes against families, against children, against properties, against men, against, it's just, it's only women are the only thing that matter for this. But I think you're right. Once men are called upon and guns are placed in their hands and they're given responsibility, they're going to see that responsibility as defending their homeland and everything in it, not just a few loudmouth women who don't have the sense to watch where they're going in the evening. Um, I shouldn't say that, but yeah, you get my point.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and there is of course this idea. Some people argue that a country with a welfare state, as we've mentioned already, is basically a matriarchy, but a country with an army is a patriarchy. So giving up the welfare state or transferring some of the financial support from the welfare state to the military could very easily, if it's done properly, uh, you know, uh, diminish some of the matriarchal qualities of the society and enhance some of the patriarchal values of the society. Now, they'll do everything they can to prevent that, but they'll try to turn men into just cannon fodder, and this is what they're trying to do in Ukraine. After they've killed all the Ukrainian men, they want to start sending European men, Western European men, to die in Ukraine to replace the Ukrainian men who have all died practically or left the country. So they'll do everything they can to prevent this and turn the men not into citizens, not into citizens in arms, but into cannon fodder. And but men have to at some point they have to stand up and show that if they're going to defend their country, that gives them a certain amount of leverage to demand rights and a say in the way the society is governed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, Stephen, I have a question before we wrap this up. How is this feminization of the governments of Europe affecting warfare? If I recall correctly, the nature of it is going into uh, punitive measures into infinity rather than settlement.
Well, yeah, this is what I'm saying here is that the Ukraine war is a good illustration of how. Um, well, let me back up a minute. Warfare, warfare generally has been feminized throughout the West. I mean, the American foreign policy has been feminized. The war in Afghanistan was fought largely on a rationalization of defending women from the Taliban after every other rationalization for the war had evaporated. That one continued. Henry Kissinger once said that warfare, actually, the historian William McDougall, pointed out that the Vietnam War was the first war in history to be fought by social programs, not to win the war, but to build South Vietnamese society using social programs. And he pointed out that Saigon and other South Vietnamese cities were turned into welfare combat zones, resembled American inner cities, welfare ghettos. Warfare, the feminization of warfare. Well, there is a good book about it by Brian Mitchell. Actually, that's one of them. And there's a couple others about the feminization of the American and British and Israeli militaries. But a book about the feminization of warfare it really still needs to be written, and you could find a lot of material for it, I think, in Europe, and the failure, the transformation of European nations from great powers. Um, Spain is a great example of that. Spain, Portugal, Britain, France. These were one time were global empires, and yet what have they been reduced to? They've been reduced to feminist matriarchies because of the welfare state. So this is something that needs a lot more attention, in my view.
Yes. Now, okay, D'Agosto, do you have any comments on what you mentioned as being the she economy?
Yeah, the she economy, the rise of the she economy.
Right.
Yeah. So basically, um, who is who is benefiting? Who is ben yeah? Who is getting benefits from the destruction of the family and from the criminalization of men and of single people. Well, according to this report from Morgan Stanley, um, uh, single people, men and women, consume more than families per capita. So they spend more basically, and women, and especially women. So having more single women is better for a lot of sectors of the economy. In general, for the economy, it's better. Well, it's more profitable for sure because they tend to consume more clothes, luxury, travel. Travel is this whole idea of traveling and realization through traveling and tourism is marketed at women, and they do this Starbucks in the morning instead of having coffee. And basically, families are horrible for the markets because they want to save money. They want to save money to build for the future. They don't want to spend all the time, and having single people, men and women, creates more market opportunities and more presentism and less saving for the future, which is something the markets are not liking at all. And this report came to me because the key idea was that by 2030-35, 45% of women would be single, of working age women would be single, and they are ready to benefit from that. They are already getting profits from that, but they are getting better and in creating markets and opportunities and products for that.
That's an excellent point. I think as you were talking, I was thinking this is something we could devote an entire show to because it's hard. People don't realize it until they start looking for it, start teasing it out. We've had a couple of guests, or we will have. Matthew Johnson, Matthew Raphael Johnson, has written an excellent article about that subject, about how the feminization of the economy. And I see he was on our show a few weeks ago, and we're planning to have Steve Brule on later. He's also, I just came across
Oh,
an article of his,
yeah.
similarly, arguing something very similar, I think, independently. So maybe we should have I don't know, maybe we should have three of you on together and all talk about this because it's something I have not, investigated or focused on, but it is really quite stunning
I,
how much of the economy has been controlled by women, especially single women, especially outside of families, uh, especially through consumerism and so forth. And that's even aside from the horrible income transfers to take place through divorce. So no, it's a striking. I mean, think how prosperous the West would be in Europe if this wasn't taking place with families. I mean, it's just amazing.
yeah, I was thinking briefly. Sorry, Bradley.
No, sorry, it's a well, okay, before I'll go and then you go. Thank you for that. Is that it seems to me that in all areas that we've discussed now, is that there is a tiny minority of people who are benefiting, whether it's in government, the economy, or warfare, who are benefiting at the expense of everyone else. That's what it seems like to me. Can we conclude that, reasonably speaking?
I think so. Um, I think so because families. I mean, families used to represent the majority, and they represent the majority of people. And all I see is that there is a coordination between markets and states to get profits. And this is something that I think I understood from what you were explaining is that this feminized net safety net is actually working very well for both markets and the states. And that has and there is only a few people benefiting from those, and it's not the majority of us.
Yes.
That's very true. And of course, if you go back historically, the family was not just a more efficient consuming unit, it was also itself a productive unit. I mean, the word economy comes from the Greek word for household government. There are many people who argue, um, excellent book by the historian Alan McFarlane, who argues that the English, the roots of the Industrial Revolution lay in the creation of the consolidation of the nuclear family as early as the 11th century in England. Because it made the house the family an efficient unit of economic production, culminating in the Industrial Revolution, which of course. So it's amazing what we've done to the impact that the family has had in destroying, not only failing to no longer creating affluence and prosperity and production, but going from a net unit that doesn't produce these things to one that to one whose failure creates drains our societies of their prosperity and their affluence.
I mean, if I understood correctly, if families are producing and selling, who is losing their share of the market because of that production and those families selling products? So the current
Yeah.
companies, right? Because they want to be the ones who produce and share and sell. And and I wanted to. There was a question. I don't know. I was going to tell you. A friend of mine had an idea that I think would be really interesting, and it was about how, for what we were discussing, about how throughout their life cycle, women are the perfect product or client for different industries. It's like we use everything from pork, right? From pigs. There is nothing that goes to waste. It is the same with women and with men, but especially with women. There is an industry for the abortion. There is an industry to use the products of the abortion. There is an industry for single women. There is an industry for married women. There is an industry. There are many industries of both men and women, but the idea is that nothing goes to waste, and that it seems like trying to get nothing to go to waste. mm, there are markets being created that are destroying us, that are going against our interests, because about our benefit, because it has some interest to create markets and to get money out of everything, right? But it, I mean, selling organs or having an industry on assassination is worth the money. No, we don't condone having paid assassins, right? So why should we why should we condone or enjoy having a pornographic industry, for example? I'm sorry that I cannot explain this properly, but I wish I spoke English a
Uh,
little bit better.
No, no, it's a fascinating and very stimulating topic. I wish we had, yeah, if we had more time, we could maybe we'll have you back and talk about that again because I think that's worth, you know, focusing on from the beginning about the economy and so forth. I live in a relatively poor Southern European country, and yet if you go in the shopping mall, 90% of the goods are luxury goods, catering to women. Men can buy sneakers, gym shoes, and that's about it for the men. Everything else is perfumes, cosmetics, lingerie, clothing, of course, shoes, all marketed to women at inflated prices.
Yes. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, and I thank you for being with us, D'Agosta. Is there any place that people can find you?
Yeah, they can find me on uh, I don't even know my handle on YouTube, but on X is at LT Agosta, and Agosta if they write, and I have a YouTube channel that I will be uploading my first video soon. I will try to debunk the idea that men are built to be promiscuous, and I will be arguing for the truth that biologically and evolutionarily men are built to have families like women. because that's how kids survive. That is going to be my
Absolutely.
first video.
I'll
That
look
will be,
forward to. I'd like to see that. Yeah,
yes,
I
I will
look
like to
forward
see
to
it also.
that.
That'll be a productive conversation as well. So, to the audience, thank you for being with us today. And Diagosta, we will include your contact information and those places that people can find you in our description here. So, everybody, subscribe to the channel if you want to get the foremost commentary on sexual politics and men's well-being. Thank you for being with me, and have a nice day.